The waiting game, draft week, the moment when every general manager is glued to their phone, the moment when deals are made, when trades are finalized, when rosters are transformed in the span of a conversation. And John Lynch is in the thick of it. Brandon Aiyuk, the ghost that's haunted the 49ers all offseason, the problem that refuses to go away, the player who's supposed to be a cornerstone, but who's become a liability. And now, as the draft approaches, as teams are making their final moves, Lynch is admitting something important. He's admitting that there's still a chance Aiyuk gets traded, but he's also admitting that the probability is low. Let's talk about what's actually happening here. Let's talk about the reality of the Brandon Aiyuk situation. Lynch doesn't feel like there's a high probability that Aiyuk gets traded this week. That's the headline. That's the message. The 49ers are not expecting to move him during the draft. But Lynch also admitted that there's still a chance. He admitted that the team has held trade discussions with specific teams. He admitted that depending on what teams are willing to offer, a trade could still happen. That's the reality of the NFL. That's the reality of professional football. Nothing is certain. Everything is negotiable. Every player has a price. And Brandon Aiyuk's price is still being determined. Now, let's talk about the Washington Commanders. Let's talk about the team that's been linked to Aiyuk the most. The Commanders have Jaden Daniels, Aiyuk's college quarterback, his connection at Arizona State, a guy who knows how to get the best out of Aiyuk, a guy who understands Aiyuk's skill set, a guy who can put him in positions to succeed. That's a compelling narrative. That's a reason for a trade to make sense. That's a scenario where a change of scenery could actually help both sides. But here's the problem. Here's what's making a trade difficult. Brandon Aiyuk is owed $16.6 million in cap hit for 2026. He's in the second year of a 4-year, $120 million contract. He's expensive. He's a massive financial commitment. And he didn't play a single snap last season. That's the reality that teams have to confront. That's the reality that's making teams hesitant. That's the reality that's keeping the probability of a trade low. Because why would a team trade for a player who's owed $16.6 million when he hasn't played in over a year? Why would a team take on that financial commitment when there's no guarantee he'll be healthy? Why would a team gamble on a player who's been a distraction, who's been unprofessional, who's caused drama within the organization? The answer is simple. They wouldn't. Not unless the compensation was right. Not unless the 49ers were willing to take on some of the financial burden. Not unless there was a compelling reason to believe that Aiyuk could be productive. And that's why the probability of a trade is low. That's why Lynch is admitting that he doesn't expect Aiyuk to be traded this week. Because the market for Brandon Aiyuk has completely evaporated. Because teams have moved on. Because the 49ers are going to have to either release him or keep him on the roster or accept a minimal return. Now, here's what's really interesting about what Lynch said. Here's what tells you everything you need to know about the 49ers' evaluation of Aiyuk. Lynch said that he feels like Aiyuk can still be a highly productive player if he can get and stay healthy. That's not a vote of no confidence. That's not a general manager throwing in the towel. That's a general manager who still believes in the player, who still thinks he can contribute, who still thinks he can be valuable. But belief and reality are two different things. And the reality is that Brandon Aiyuk hasn't played in over a year. The reality is that he's coming off a torn ACL and MCL. The reality is that he's a massive question mark. So while Lynch might believe in Aiyuk, while he might think he can still be productive, the rest of the league doesn't share that belief. The rest of the league has moved on. The rest of the league is not willing to invest in a player with that much uncertainty. And that's why the probability of a trade is low. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. Let's talk about what this means for the 49ers. The 49ers are stuck with Brandon Aiyuk. They're going to have to find a way to make it work. They're going to have to hope that he gets healthy. They're going to have to hope that he can recapture his 2023 form. They're going to have to hope that he can put the drama behind him and focus on football. And if he can do all of that, if he can check all of those boxes, then the 49ers will have a valuable receiver. They'll have a guy who can contribute. They'll have a player who can help them win. But if he can't, if he struggles, If he continues to be a distraction, then the 49ers are going to be stuck with a massive financial commitment to a player who's not contributing. That's the risk. That's the gamble. That's the situation the 49ers are in. And as the draft approaches, as teams are making their final moves, as Lynch is taking calls and exploring options, the reality is becoming clear. Brandon Aiyuk is probably going to remain a 49er. He's probably going to be on the roster when the season starts. He's probably going to be a question mark heading into 2026. And the 49ers are going to have to live with that. They're going to have to manage that. They're going to have to hope that everything works out, because the alternative, trading him for minimal compensation, releasing him and taking a cap hit, keeping him and dealing with a distraction, all of those options are worse than just keeping him and hoping he gets healthy. So Brandon Aiyuk stays. The 49ers move forward. And everyone waits to see if he can actually contribute when the season. Tease the reality of the Brandon Aiyuk situation. That's the story that's going to define the 49ers offseason. And that's the gamble that John Lynch is willing to take. Because sometimes in the NFL, you have to bet on talent. You have to believe in a player's ability to overcome adversity. You have to be willing to invest in a guy who's fallen out of favor and hope that he can recapture his form. And that's exactly what the 49ers are doing with Brandon Aiyuk.